Okay, so I took Expand and I created this little pad. So just before we start, is the audio okay? Is my level good and you can hear the synthesizer? Because in my film scoring class last week, there were some issues with the audio and it had to do with this the video switcher I have. And I spent time trying to sort everything out this week. I had a friend of mine help me through it. So, okay. So I just put together a pad here. And I'd love to have that as a sampler instrument to play. So let's take a look at. So what I did was I put together what I would call a sampling template, where you could take any sound source that you create on a soft synth in a computer, or if you have an external synthesizer, you see in my back here, I've got all these other keyboards. If I wanted to sample a sound from one of those so that I could have it with me in the computer and not have to turn on one of those synths, I would do a similar activity as I'm doing now. I've set up a template where I play every a minor third. So I got a C, an E flat, a G flat, a B double flat, or an A. And I just go up a few octaves up the keyboard. And you could see through the timeline. Let me make this all one clip. Right. I've got almost 2 minutes worth of notes here. Now, in order to make something like this sound good, you don't really need to sample every note. Every third note is more than sufficient. There have been sample libraries out there that sound great that sample 2 notes in an octave, a C and an F sharp, and then they just keep going up. But this is four notes an octave for maybe 3 or 4 octaves. So this is my template. And if I play this, let's go back. Right, you hear that low note. It ends before the next note starts. Now, if I wanted to make those notes last longer, what I could do is slow the rate down. So if I slowed it down to 45, I would have quite a bit more much more sustained time. And then it would just play through this entire sequence of notes. Now, once you've got this done, what you could do is right-click on this, and you could commit this. All right? So does everybody remember how to do commit? Or have I not talked about that yet? Yeah, Kevin, you don't know about this. All right. If I want to, this commit is good for a couple of things. Commit will let you, let's say you've got a lot of instrument tracks open and your CPU is starting to go a little crazy. You could do one of 2 functions to your tracks to make them use practically no CPU. One is you can freeze the track, and the other is commit. Freezing it, what happens is that you create a temporary audio file, and then when you unfreeze the track, the audio file goes away. And committing means that you create a permanent audio track and it gets placed in the timeline. They sound like they're the same thing, similar, right? Well, the one thing about freezing a track that's very difficult if you're a film composer like me is that if you freeze a track, then you can't change tempo. So let's say I'm writing a film cue and I need to change the tempo and I've frozen a bunch of my synth tracks. I have to unfreeze them, put in the tempo change, and then freeze them again. Whereas if you commit, it's just an audio track. So it doesn't matter how many times you change the tempo. So they're both found if you right-click on the name here, freeze and commit. So let me show you freeze first. And freeze, if you're just doing a steady tempo from the beginning to the end, freeze is great. So I'm freezing the soft pad. And notice it does an overlay on your MIDI on the MIDI information in your track, but notice how it's grayed out. Now, obviously, it's the color that I've chosen here. So if and let me change my grid. So you could see that it's got all the notes there, but it's overlaid right on top of the MIDI clips. And you notice over here that the instrument and the channel assign, the MIDI channel assign or the output selector, they're grayed out, so they're inactive. So if you right-click here, unfreeze, boom, you're back. So if you've got a laptop and it's dying, and you've got more instruments that you want to do a piece of music that has more instruments than your computer can handle, you would freeze some of the tracks. And that would work really well if you've got Kontakt and some of your tracks take up a lot of CPU because they've done a lot of scripting with the sound. It doesn't, how big the sample size is isn't a concern because you can always do something with Kontakt. You could purge all samples and then it only loads the one you play and you save an incredible amount of memory, which I would normally show you, but since we're not using Kontakt, it's not really applicable in our class right now. So freezing is really good, but for our purposes, since we're going to import these as clips, we're going to commit, right? So I'm going to commit. Now, you would copy all this stuff and you would insert it after the last selected track, which is basically the instrument track that you've chosen. So it'll just put the audio file right below this. And then you get an option here. To the source tracks, which is the soft pad here, you can hide and make inactive. You can make inactive, you can delete, and you can do nothing. So I'm just going to hide and make it inactive, and I'm going to show you how that works. I'll click OK. And then notice right here, I've got a regular audio file. If we look in our tracks list right here, we could see that this soft pad is italicized right up here. That means it's inactive, and the little dot to the left, the column on the far left, is grayed out, which means you don't see it. So if I just click on that, you'll see it. It gets out of the tracks list and into the timeline. And then I can make, and then I can make it active from here. Or if you just right-click on this name, show and make active, boom, it brings it back to life. So this is another way where you can accomplish two things. You can free up space. You can commit to audio, which is also great if you're going to create a stem mix to send to somebody else that's maybe working in Logic, and they can open the track up in Logic and mix it. And you can clear up some space in your timeline because this gets hidden and made inactive. All right. And now here we've got our soft pad. Now what you would do is you do exactly what we've been doing in class. Tab. Whoops. You get right by that thing and you'd separate all these out. You get rid of what's in the middle, and then you'd name everything. You'd export everything, which I've already done. So if I put in one stereo instrument track, I'll call this structure soft pad.
Professor, can I ask you something?
Yes, Huna.
I'm not sure what's differences between freezing and committing.
Okay. So committing makes a permanent audio file. Freezing makes a temporary audio file on top of the instrument track. So I don't know if you guys remember this, but an instrument track has two components to it. It transmits MIDI and it plays audio. Pro Tools has audio tracks and Pro Tools has MIDI tracks. But an instrument track, Pro Tools also has aux tracks. So what an instrument track is a combination of a MIDI track, which sends MIDI information from the keyboard or drum pads or whatever you've got that shoots MIDI information, and it triggers an instrument that you've inserted into the track in the insert column, and the audio of that instrument comes through the output of the instrument track. But you can't record audio onto the instrument track. So what freezing does is it creates a temporary audio picture that it places on the timeline, but it's not a real audio track. Committing creates a whole new track with audio in it on an audio track.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay. So then you'd go through these, you'd name them, the pitches and everything, you'd export them. And let's see, instrument, structure free. Get rid of this. And let's go to our desktop. Okay, so you see here that I've gone through everything and I've named everything, correct? So we would just do, so I'm just going to move this onto my second screen, but basically I'm going to take all of those and I'm going to drag them into the browser area here. And then
didn't these sounds all start off as a MIDI instrument?
Yes.
So, and then where it's ending up as a MIDI instrument again?
Correct. So let's say I'm showing you this because what if you want, like, let's do this. You're working in Pro Tools. Your friend is working in Logic. Logic has something called ESX24, right? It's a software sampler instrument. You can create these samples. You could shoot those over to your friend, and they could load it into the ESX, and they could play back your MIDI tracks. And this way you could collaborate with two different, this is one way. Now, let's say that this wasn't a software instrument. Let's say that it was, you borrowed an Oberheim 2-voice Pro, like that cream colored instrument back there, this one here, right? And you made some great sounds on there, but you had to give it back, right? You would create your MIDI template, you would sample all those notes as audio, and then you would create a software instrument from it, right? So these are just alternative sampling techniques. So let's say you created a beautiful pad, original pad using Structure, and you wanted to sell that, create a sample pack to sell it. This is the way you do that, right? So these are like things that you can do. It's, you know, you're not going to put it out there and somebody's going to stick $750 to use an amount of money that's appropriate today, $750 and for your samples. But you could start building up a library of samples that you could see about posting somewhere and selling. So these are just alternative sampling techniques. And I'm going to show you more in a minute. So prefix note, fill centered. Okay. And then now, right? And I can play that from Structure. And let's see, this would be a soft pad with my initials. And then we can play around with this like we do with the other ones. We could slow the attack down, add release. Here, let's... right, so you can see it's playing after I let go. We can add a filter here, right? And then I can right-click, Learn MIDI CC. And I've got my little controller here. So I am going to move this guy here. Let's see, Learn MIDI CC. And why is it not doing anything? Oh. It's not learning MIDI CC. What a drag. All right, well, you're supposed to be able to, it's a little embarrassing, set this up so that you can use a fader. Like if you notice that if I move this knob here, this thing moves. So it is receiving, that's volume. Oh, cutoff did work. Oh, that's MIDI volume, right? Sorry, I'm just getting a little confused here. Okay, this is supposed to move, automate. I'm not sure why it's not doing that, but anyway, you can add a filter here and change the sound a little bit. Right, and then you've created, a whole, you know, it's just an alternative way of creating samples than recording something as audio and editing it out in the wild, or recording another instrument, acoustic instrument. There's all sorts of ways where you could create your own library of sounds. Let me just show you something here. I think I've gone over this before. Okay, so if I play this soft pad here, and I want to automate the cutoff, you see how I'm moving that fader now? Oh, it's doing two things. All right, let's do this. Let's make it forget MIDI CC here. And you can see my cutoff is moving. And I can control it from this little fader. Right, so if you right-click on most of these controls in most instruments in Pro Tools, you should be, or just in general, you should be able to automate, you know, add a controller to this. Now, some of you might have keyboards that have little faders and knobs on them, and you could do that from those as well. And what that does is it gives you the hands-on experience. It gives you the hands-on experience as if you're playing a real synthesizer. That's one of the great things about having an actual synthesizer, is that it has knobs on it and sliders and faders, and it's like you're live mixing as you're playing, and that you're performing with those knobs and faders and all the controls on there, the pitch bend wheel, the mod wheel, and having these controls here assigned to a controller like this gives you a lot of expressivity when you're performing to change the timbre of the sound. It's like you're doing a live automation. So you're automating to animate, except you're doing it live with your fingers on the little sliders and the knobs here. All right. I know that's...
Professor.
Yes, Roberto.
I have a question. Can you do that on Pro Tools, like change the sound, like with the same expand instrument, but change the sound while the recording is going?
Yeah. So let me show you something. Let me go to the end here so I don't mess up my template. All right. So I'm going to play something with one hand. Well, let me change the camera angle so you can see what I'm doing with my left hand. right? So you saw me that I played all that stuff in with my left hand, and I'm playing notes in my right hand. And as I'm moving these faders, the sound is changing. Okay. So
But can you change it afterward? Let's say you record
yep.
something
Let me show
a
you.
little more complex. Okay.
I'm getting there. So if you go to controllers, you'll notice that I've got undefined 21. Right? Here, so let me just show you. So this is the MIDI information here. And if I want to go to the MIDI editor right here, all right, if I click this little triangle right down here, it opens up the edit lane. And this edit lane has all sorts of parameters that you can access. This is velocity, so I could change the velocity afterwards. So in other words, if I want to have them all be the same velocity, I can just do that. Somehow I touched the pitch bend, but it doesn't look like there's any information. And you could see that they're white when there's no information on it, but when it's amber, there's information being recorded. So undefined 21, well, that's what I set the cutoff filter to be at MIDI, what's called control change. That's not the original meaning of that term, MIDI CC. But that's what it's called now. So what I can do now let me play this, and you could see that the sound will change. Right? You could see that line. You could follow the line. Well, I don't like that. I can draw something in with the pencil tool afterwards. I could change the shape of the pencil tool. I could do something. I've gone over this with the other students. I can do something crazy like this and add some rhythmic interest to it, right? Because that's just moving the filter. So if you look at expand here, you'll see this knob here will move with this. Right, so let's say that you wanted to make something that was kind of funky. Let's bring up our tempo to, let's make it like twice as fast as that, right? And let me do this. Let me consolidate all this so that it's one. So you can create rhythmic effects, right? You're automating that.
Mm-hmm.
I could play that in, but it wouldn't be as slick as that. But yes, you could play stuff in. If you don't like it, but you like the notes you've played, you can go into this area of the MIDI editor and change it after the fact. Yep.
Cool. Thank you.
Sure. Also,
What's the name again, please?
What's the name of what, Huna? I'm sorry, I didn't understand the question.
Under the piano.
Oh, that's called an edit lane. EDITLANE.
Sorry.
I'll type it in the chat.
Thank you.
Let me show you how you get to there, all right? Do you see in the pink here where the track is, the color? At the bottom of that, there's a little sideways facing triangle. You click on that and it opens it up. All right, let me go over this. This is good because apparently I didn't go over it well enough in previous semesters. Everybody seems to have forgotten. All right, so this is the edit lane area. And right here will let you know the parameter that's being edited. So this is the lane view selector, right? So you got velocity, and you can see here's our velocity. That's how fast the key goes down. MIDI volume. So if I wanted to do MIDI volume, I could use I could draw that in, right? And this will be a fade in and a fade out. Whoops. Yeah, hold on. Hey, where are my notes? There we go. Okay, great. Let me just, got a little confused there for a second. So I could draw in MIDI volume and do a fade in and fade out. Right, and we're going to get into this with mixing too. This is all part of automating. You can't hear this because Zoom is broadcasting in mono, but if this is MIDI pan, I can have this start on the right-hand side and then go to the left-hand side. So in my earbuds here, it's going from this side to this side. And then I can undo that. And I could do a pitch bend if I wanted to. Cool stuff for film scoring. Those of you that are taking the class with me. And then let me just undo that. And so they've got all the stuff, mod wheel, breath control, and some of these. And then there are all sorts of other controllers that you can add. There's 128 of these, right? And if you go to add, remove controllers, it comes up with another list, right? So the names of them are all here. And then let's say if I go to 64 to 60, sustain, portamento, soft pedals. So there are some sampled pianos that have soft pedaled piano notes as a layer that you can trigger. And this is the parameter for that. So you would just add it. And then it's available in your list here, soft pedal. Now, the other thing is that you can have multiple lanes showing at once. It gets a little crowded if you do this with your laptop, but I'll just show you. There's a little plus sign here. Let me change the color so it's easier to see. It's not really easier to see. Okay, there's a little plus sign right here. Click on that and you add another lane and you can select whatever you want. So I could see velocity and my velocity and the cutoff filter work I did. And you could add as many of these as you want. It gets to be, like I said, a lot to view. And then you could just click the negative sign to get rid of them, and then you can just close this down like that. Does that answer your question, Roberto?
Absolutely. That's amazing. Thank you.
How about you, Huna? You okay now?
Yeah, I have one more question for the pitch
Yes.
instrument. So for the structure free, if you don't put the name of key, like like before, like D sharp, D flat, something like that. So and if you put everything, then
if you don't put the names of the notes, right? Structure free won't put them in the right place. With the full
yeah, but if you choose the whole area, a whole range from the structure free, then it doesn't make sense. I don't know how to say, but yeah, you could choose the range of pitch from the structure free. So then
all right, let me just show you something. Let me explain it again, and maybe I'll be able to answer your question. All right, let me try that. So I'm going to get rid of these. Now, I've named these pitches, and right. What structure does is it fills in the spots between the notes, and it keeps with the right pitches. So in other words, it takes this, let's say you've got C and your next note is E flat. It takes this C and it stretches the sample, that's what they call it, so that it'll play D flat, it'll play D natural, and then you'll play E flat here. Yeah, it does it automatically. It fills in the spaces. I could show you that better in Kontakt, so let me do that, all right? You'll understand the concept, but in structure free is very limited. So let's do this. Let me make this inactive, and and if we were in the classroom this semester, we'd be using Kontakt. So let me add a new. Okay. So if I open up this, and there's something called a mapping editor, and you'll notice here, that looks a lot like the Midi editor in Pro Tools, right? It's got the little keyboard if it was on its side. Okay, so let me take my samples.
So I already upload my assignment for
Yes.
this week. So I know how to do it, but what's different? I mean, maybe quality. If you put every single note on that, and quality is better. Sound quality is better.
The more samples you have, the more accurate, because as it stretches the pitches up and down, it degrades the quality of sound. So if you have a pitch that's very low on the piano and that's the only note that you've sampled, but you want to play something very high, it doesn't sound good because it stretches it too far.
Yeah, that was my question.
Okay, so where is...
Professor, I was wondering if there was any way with structure free that you could save a patch that you put in yourself.
Nope.
Like
only thing you can do is save the session. Yeah, it's really crappy. Just to be honest with you, it's crappy. So where is...
But Kontakt, you would be able to like save a patch.
Oh yeah, totally. And with the full version of structure, you could save a patch. And if you're using Logic, you can save a patch in ESX24. ESX24 is a very good sampler. So let me just show you this in Kontakt, all right? So let me grab all these samples, and I'm going to drag them into Kontakt like this, right? And it's a mess. Right, so I'm going to show you what I'm playing. So let me switch my camera view. So I'm going to play some notes, and when I'm playing inside this box, they will sound relatively okay. Now watch this. Right, I'm just going up the keyboard and it's jumping all over the place. So what I would do here is the map mode. Hold on a second. Okay, so now it's put these notes where they're supposed to be, right? This is C1 and it's on, but there's no note here on D flat and D. So what you could do then is you could either manually just stretch these down like this, right? And it fills in that gap, or you could select all of these. And this has a function here where you click this button and now everything is completely mapped properly. So you see how it fills in the spots between the notes.
Yeah, so if you have less notes than that, then sound quality is worse.
It depends on the sound. So like if it's an acoustic instrument, more than likely. If it's a synthesizer, not so much until you get into the extremes of the keyboard. You know, extreme high. Pitching things down usually sounds better than pitching things up. So in other words, if you take, let's say, let's do this. Let me take this. Oh, let's see. Hey, what's happening here? All right, so I just deleted all those, all right? So let's say I take E flat 1, right? And I'm just going to manually place that on E flat 1. If this is actually good to know, this stuff. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to stretch this like this. So it's one note. It's going to play all the way up the keyboard. So that's the original note. That's way up on the top of the keyboard. You see how bad that it doesn't? It's not long enough. It doesn't sound good. But if I do this, let's say I take E flat 4, which is a higher pitch, and I put that right there, and I stretch it down. Better, right?
Wow.
So stretching down sounds better than stretching up if you only have a few samples.
I
But
see.
so with synthesizer sounds like this, 3, 2, 3, 4, if you split the octave up into equal subdivisions. So what are equal subdivisions of the octave? That would be half steps, whole steps, minor thirds, and major thirds, and tritones, right? So if you just took, you could do either minor thirds, so C, E flat, F sharp, A, major thirds, C, E, G, C, or tritones, C, F sharp, all the way up the keyboard. With sound like this, that should probably be okay. But I like to do it doesn't cost, it's not that big a deal once you get this template together to do that. It plays it automatically. It's just a little bit more editing time. Okay?
Thank you.
Sure. You're like a question machine. All right. Let's talk about doing some sound design, all right? Give me 1 second. Great. Okay, so let's take a listen to this. Let me actually hide all these. And let me make this really big. So this is a very large Japanese or Buddhist temple bell, right? It's a big round gourd about this big that's hollow, and my friend played it with a mallet. It's out at the Berkeley Zen Center in Berkeley, California, and I went to visit him. He's been a resident there since the 1980s, and I went to visit him like 4 summers ago. So he did a bunch of them, different volumes. Picked up. And this one here, what I did was I recorded this with my phone, right? And I had a little microphone hooked up to the phone. For these first 3, I was standing above holding the phone like this. For these last 2, you could see that they're louder because they've got a bigger attack, right? I took the phone and I put it inside the bell, and it got a different sound. So I like this one here. So let's just work with this one. So I'm going to separate this out. And then I'm going to get rid of this. So I've got this here. Now I could make that a sound and play that from the keyboard. No problem, right? And I believe it's a D flat. Yeah, we'll have to see what pitch it is. So let me just... Yeah, see how the pitch changes? It's got so many overtones, you don't really know what the pitch is. So we're just going to make it into something different. So what kinds of functions can you do to the sound to make it different. I could add a filter, right? I could take this. Let's say I take our one band EQ and I could add a low pass filter. And I could change the sound there. I could add a high pass filter. Changing the sound, right? That doesn't really do anything for me. What happens if let's see, I'm just going to use the stuff that comes with Pro Tools. Pitch 2, I believe it is. So what happens if I pitch this down 2 octaves? So I'm just going to play it from inside of this. All of a sudden, we've got something completely different, right? It's like something you could use in a science fiction movie. So if I pitch it down 1 octave, well, if I unlink these and I pitch the left side down 1 octave and the right side down more than 1 octave, and we get a really interesting sound. Now we can mix the amount of pitch that's in there, right? So this is the mix of the affected sound. So this is all with the pitch shift, and this is half pitch shift and half of the normal sound. All right, so before I do anything, I want to make sure that my original sound is not affected. It won't be, but I want to leave it on the timeline. So I'm just going to copy and paste it here. And then I'm going to render the second one. Right? Now, I want to add some filtering to that. Now, well, before I do the filtering, what if I want to add some dirt to that, right? So Pro Tools has the Sans amp. Actually, this is a free plugin that you guys should find and install. It's called Saturation Knob, and it's from this company, SoftTube. And if you go to their website, I'm going to type it in the chat. You just have to sign up for an account and maybe get emails occasionally, which you can eventually, you know, but this is a really good free plugin. So I could add some fuzz to that, right? It's getting a little crunchy. Here's without it. With it. Now it's getting a little loud. I could see my meters are peaking, so I'm going to just bring the level down here using clip gain. Does everybody know clip gain? Let me show you. Let me move it so that it's out of the way of me. Okay, so right here at the bottom of the clip, you'll see a number, a dB number, with a little fader. So you can just click and drag that up and down. It makes it louder and softer. Also, there's a key command for that. I believe it's Control and Shift, and the up and down arrow does it in 5 decibel increments. Michael Lipsy is texting me. I should look at that, but I'll do it after class. Okay. Let me make that a little, it's just, I can just drag it down. There's a really nice grunginess to that now, right? All right, that's one thing. So what if let me go over here. There's in our Air Music Technology folder, or list. We've got all these interesting things here that we could do. So let's do a multi-chorus. And I'm just going to go to a factory preset. I'm just going to do soft chorus. And I'm going to keep the mix at about 50%. I'm going to bring the saturation down a little bit. It's like a little wah, wah, wah to the sound now. And then finally, go to reverb. And let me add deverb. And I'm going to add a plate, a vocal plate. And I'm going to make it a little larger. And I'm not going to make it completely wet. Cut some of the highs off. Here's the original. Oh, wait, hold on. Here's the original. And here's the new one. Hold on. Now, if you do this with delay, you have to, when you're going to render this or commit it, you have to pick longer than the file because the delay tail or the reverb tail will linger on after the end of the note, right? So listen. There's still sound till about now, all right? So I'm going to select from here a little longer, and then I'm going to commit that. And I'm going to do nothing. And here is our, right? And then I can just render that and make that an instrument that I can play. So those are some sound design ideas that you can do to transform a sound completely. You don't have to do anything for the assignment coming up. I just want you to be able to get through the assignment, but I'm just showing you some ideas for the future. All right. Now, let me just show you. So I'm going to rename this. Berkeley Zen Center. I'll just say Sound Design SD1, SD, and then I think it's C. I'm just going to pitch it at like C2. And then I'm going to export that. And I'm just going to export it to my desktop. Great for just right now, just for quickness. And then add structure free. Get rid of this. Desktop. Perfect for your science fiction movie. Let me show you. I could show you a couple of more ideas. Do you want that, or or I'll move on to the next bit. Let me show you one more thing. All right, so we've got a metal can, right? I'm gonna get rid of some of that high end. And then I'm gonna add some distortion. Let's see what that does. Let me see what pitch that is. That's an A flat-ish. I'll tune that later. So we'll just go to the typical mod delay from Pro Tools, right? Not doing anything. So I'm just going to add a little bit of delay. And I'm going to add a low pass filter to get rid of some of the high end. All right, let me make that a little quicker. Oh, I'm at 45, that's why. Let me speed that tempo up. And let's add our deverb again. And I'm just going to do, this time I'll do a long plate. And I'll bring down the amount. Just get a little bit rid of some of the high end. It's a little too shh. There's too much of that in the sound for me. And I turn the gain up here. Okay, so let me render this. Now notice that the sound continues on for quite some time, so I have to go way past. So that's good. So I'm going to commit this. So it made this a minute long. Interesting. So if I solo this, right, you can hear that this is playing the red track with all the effects on it. So now, yes, somebody had a question?
So we could commit the audio track and instrument track too, right?
Yep, correct. So when I commit the audio track, what I'm doing is I'm adding all of these plugins, right? Because you can hear now, I'm going to mute this track, right? So and this is soloed. So it's playing the echo, even though there's no echo in this track and the reverb and everything. So this is actually, I said it was an A flat, correct?
Yes.
Thank you. I can export that out, and then, oh, let's do this. Rather than calling a new instrument, and let me just do this. I'll get rid of this. Go to my desktop. Really? Are you embarrassing me like that, sound? Huh, I don't know why it's doing that, not playing it. Well, let me, oh, because it's muted. Ha ha! And let me add an envelope. Slow attack. Right, so you can just create all sorts of rhythmic things where you get sort of this randomness to what's being played. And this also, Huna, this emphasizes what I was telling you before and everybody else, is that see how nice it sounds down there, but higher. That's good, but it's very short. That can be useful, but really really cool stuff. So again, these are just alternative ideas for creating unique and interesting sampler instruments. You can create sampler instruments from a real musical instrument like a piano, a guitar. You can find objects, create percussion instruments, whatever other things you could think about. You can play instruments in a different way, right? I could take this guitar and beat on it, or I could, right? And I could sample that, and I could sound design that. All sorts of stuff. Let me get these earbuds back in my ears.
Is there any other program like a structure free?
Kontakt. But Kontakt is very expensive.
We could buy it. Right? We could buy it.
Yes, I own Kontakt. I use it in almost every piece of music I write. Give me 1 second to get these back in. I'm going to cut this out of the video so you don't sit there mocking me. I was getting tired of looking at the headphones in my, so I bought in-ear monitors. but they don't fit my ears very well. Give me 2 minutes. All right, so this will have to do. It's not actually in the way I want them, but I don't feel like taking much more time doing this. All right, so any questions on, can you use Kontakt or structure free? Yes. Structure free, you can use Kontakt in Logic. Structure free is unique to Pro Tools. You can buy a paid version of Structure, which I would not recommend doing, and use that in Logic. I'm not sure. Does Fruity Loop Studios have VST, Irene? Do you know?
I'm not sure.
Well, if it has a VST plugins, you can use it in Fruity Loop Studio. But you could definitely use it in Logic, in Performer, in Cubase, in Ableton, in Reaper. Kontakt is, one of the biggest pieces of software, is one of the biggest software instruments out there in terms of usage. It's used on every film score.
6 that you use?
I'm
Kontakt
sorry?
6?
I have the latest version. I just upgraded yesterday. I have Kontakt 5 and Kontakt 6 in my computer because when I'm grading schoolwork, we only have Kontakt 5 in the school computers. So if you were doing this in the classroom, you'd be sending me projects with Kontakt 5. And if I did any work on it and sent it back to you, if I open it up in Kontakt 6, then you would not be able to work on it. It wouldn't open up anymore. It's really a weird thing. It's not backwards compatible. So I have this is Kontakt 6, and then this is Kontakt 5 right here. If these are some of the libraries that I have accrued over the years for Kontakt. You could see it's going on and on and on and on and on. And you don't need all these things, but what happens is that I buy things for a project and then I end up owning them, right? But you can get some free instruments for Kontakt. Like this is the free orchestra from Project Sam. This is actually, if you can get something called the Kontakt Player for free. If you go to nativeinstruments.com, they have a bunch of free stuff that you can download. They just want your email address to bombard you with offers. You can download the Kontakt Player, and then there are free libraries that you can download from other people that you can play. So that's a good way to expand your sound palette without spending money. But this is free Sordino violins from this company called Project Sam. Let me just do this. Right, so they're not bad. Then they have these controls where you can do some sound design. And it has a filter. And then you can automate the filter. So I would definitely recommend, if you have the space in your computer, to download all the free stuff from Native Instruments. It's really good. Great, Ariel. That's good to hear. Yeah, it's just, it's not complete, the Project Sam free library, but there's some cool sounds in there that you can use, and it's better to have them than not have them. It's certainly a nice adjunct to structure. Expand. All right. So for the rest of the class, we're going to move on to a different topic. And I think that we covered a little bit of this in the last semester, which we normally wouldn't, but because everything got messed up with having to go online, I had to change the order of things. So, sampler composition examples. Oh, right. Before we go, these are people that these are undergraduates. I think they've probably been out of the college now for 5 years. Jonathan Altman, you guys don't know him. ML. Who is ML? VS is Valentina Savu. I forget who ML is. So let's listen to some of their projects. So they recorded and created all these sounds. Just goes on. Jonathan was very creative. This is Valentina Savu. So she recorded some sounds in the wild. Move ahead a little bit on this one. Right, they're very avant-garde things. So if we were in the school this semester instead of here, we'd be doing a project like this because we would have access to Kontakt and you'd be making a composition using sampled instruments, and you'd probably maybe have 10 or 15 sampler instruments. But since we're online this semester and you only have access to structure free, I had to switch the assignment around so that you learn the principles of sampling and what some of the things are, that you could do with sampling and how you can use them to create a piece of music. In addition, there's a skill here to create like a sample pack that, if you do a good one, someday you could start maybe having a side business creating things like this that people might be interested in using on their own projects. So there's some practical uses for that. All right. So in class 4 folder, there's a bunch of stuff here for you. Let's just take a look at this for a second. Yeah, we don't need to look at that. So I've got reverb basics, definition of equalizer, compression checklist. So let's start off with the EQ checklist. Because we're going to be working on mixing a little bit for our next project. So I'm giving you a little bit of this in advance because I've done as much as I can do with the sampler stuff for right now. So when your next assignment, which will probably be due maybe the 4th of November, is going to be to mix a piece of music, and you're going to import stems and everything. Also, everybody knows that on the 14th is a Wednesday. Oh, you're not, no, this isn't the film scoring class, but just for your own edification, that is a Monday schedule. All right. So whatever classes you have on Monday, which is, oh, that's our classes on Monday. Right. So anybody who's in film scoring, there's no film scoring class on this, on the 14th, but we will be meeting on the 14th. All right, so Wednesday is a Monday at Queens College. This kind of stuff has been going on since I was an undergraduate. Okay. So one of the things you want to think about when you're mixing a piece of music is how do things fit together to create an entire unified soundstage. You have a bass guitar, but you also have a kick drum and tom-toms. And maybe you have a keyboard with a left hand. And maybe you've got the low strings on an acoustic guitar or an electric guitar. You have a vocalist, and maybe you, if you're an orchestral musician, maybe you've got an English horn, and they're in the same pitch register. How do you make all of these things fit together so that your mix is musically cogent? You can hear everything in your mix, and most importantly, it enhances the story that your music is trying to tell. Right? A bad mix can ruin a great song. The analogy I use is that if you take a great piece of classical music that everybody knows, like Beethoven's Fifth, ba-da-da-dum, ba-da-da-dum, and you try to get elementary school orchestra to play it, that's only been playing their instruments for 6 months, you're going to think it's a horrible piece of music. But if you get seasoned professionals and a good rehearsals, you'll be blown away by it. Why? Because when these people are performing, they're being led by the conductor, who's the quarterback of the orchestra. But they're playing in a way that they're each mixing while they're playing. They're listening to what they play. And let's say you're in the strings and you're on a second desk violin, you want to listen to the first desk and blend in. So you're making those decisions consciously. You're mixing as you're playing. You know the composition, so you know when you need to be the melody instrument and when you need to be the supportive instrument as the piece unfolds. You know that there's a flute solo now, so I have to listen to make sure that I am not stepping on the flute player when I'm playing. If you're playing timpanis and you're covering up the melody instrument, you're not bringing out the fullest capability, the most all the expressiveness and the intent and the storytelling of the piece of music you're working on. If you're a pianist and you're playing with a singer, and the singer is singing an F and you're playing an F sharp a half step above and an E a half step below them, unless there's a specific musical intent, that's not really the best way to voice the chords. You can play those notes, but they have to be voiced properly and they have to be balanced properly. And this is all live musicians, if they're sensitive and experienced and they're good musicians, they're also engineers mixing as they go along. And that's one thing that separates out artists from a good musician. You know, an artist will know how to do all those things. A good musician may have technical facility to run up and down an instrument. They may know lots of licks. They may know how to play giant steps in all 12 keys and all these impressive feats of prestidigitation. Just wanted to throw that word in there. But the artist tells a story. And telling a story means supporting the unfolding of the ideas with the appropriate soundstage. So the biggest way that there are the two biggest ways that you can make your music all fit together is stereo, left, center, and right, and balancing out the volumes. That's 90% of the game. But there are other things that you can use that will help you out. I like to think of, let's change this a little bit. I like to think of mixing music as having 4 dimensions. There's pitch, the low pitch to the high pitch. There's volume. There's soft volumes to loud volumes. There's panning, which, let's say that you're looking at a stage. There's left to right or right to left and all in between. And the fourth one is space, front to back. Does something sound like it's very physically close to you, or does it sound like it's in the back of a hall somewhere off in the distance? So that's one of the concepts that I like to teach with mixing, 4 dimensions of mixing. Pitch, low to high, volume, soft to loud, panning, left to right, and space, front to back, or back to front.
Pete, could I ask a question?
Yep. Always ask question, Arun.
It's Arun here.
Yep.
So intuitively, when you say left to right, okay, that's obviously panning. When you say volume or amplitude, that's obviously the fader, lighter or softer. I forget what the third one is, but then
Pitch.
now you're saying
Pitch.
about the pitch. Okay, that's just the actual, what the instrument's playing. But then from a technical point of view, how do you define front to back then? Is that through reverb or what? That's really puzzling to me.
Okay. Well, there's several ways that you can define that. The first one is how an instrument is recorded. This is actually really good. Let me, I can show you actually. It'd be easier than. So I'm gonna, this is why I love Kontakt so much, because people have done such incredible work. So I'm going to okay, that's a timpani. You all hear that? Now, this is recorded right here on this controller right here. You see on the right here, it has the letter C, has the letter T, and the letter A. Close means close mic'd. That means the microphone was stuck right next to the timpani. And that's the sound. You can hear a little bit of room, but it's very close. The T is something that's called a tree mic. And the tree mic is a set of 3 microphones that was first done with Decca recordings in the 1950s when stereo recording of orchestral music started happening. And basically there are 2 microphones, let's see, on like at the conductor's ears, like above and a little out. And then there's a third microphone a little bit in front of that. So that's a little bit away from where the instrument is. So if you think of a timpani, the timpani is further away than the first violinist, who's usually to the conductor's left, right? Like so much so that they can stand there and shake the first violinist's hand. But the timpani is back behind, in a row behind the instruments. So the tree sounds further away. And then they have these ambient mics, which are even further away than that, right? So you can blend these in. So I have close mic, and then I can start adding the ambient mic, and it gives the impression of it being further away towards the back of the soundstage. Now, one thing you have to understand is that for the most part, if you're talking about like a Dolby Atmos system or a 5.1 system or a surround system, or when you're in a movie theater where there's speakers all around you, or you've got a home system where you've got, subwoofer and center speaker and 2 side speakers and speakers in back of you, that's one thing. But most of us listen to most music right now with earbuds in. And earbuds have 2 speakers, basically, a left and a right. So we're trying to give the illusion of creating a multi-dimensional space inside of 2 speakers. Because if you're just using your ears, you're hearing stuff all around you. You're hearing stuff above you. You're hearing stuff below you. But if you're out walking down the street with nothing in your ears, you're hearing stuff. You could tell whether a sound is coming from behind you and ground level, or if it's a jet, you can tell that it's coming from above your head. If you hear a car horn, you know whether it's in front of you or in back of you. If you hear a car going by, you can physically feeling it going past your left ear or your right ear. So you can, your ears are like amazing. The ear-brain combination is an amazing receptor and decoder of the physical world that we live in terms of sound. We're trying to create that illusion in a 2-dimensional space. Right?
And so if you had something that was recorded perfectly dry and you wanted to make it sound like it's further away, would you then reduce its amplitude and increase the reverb? That's how you do it?
Well, yes, you would. So let's do that. So let me find something that's really dry. Here, let's do this. All right, so I'm entering, let me just call up my piano sound here. Dry. So this is a completely dry piano instrument, right? Where's my sustain pedal? Okay, here we go. Now, if I play a sharp note, right, it sounds very dry. So I'm going to teach you guys a different way, but just for right now, I'm going to put reverb in here, right? And I'm going to do 2 things. Let's just do, first of all, okay, so we're going to add my favorite reverb. All right, so here we have the same sound. Oh, Ariel, I'll talk about that in a second. All right, let me finish this. I just saw your question. All right, so this basically sounds the same as before. So this is just the default setting for this reverb. This is the mix knob, so I'm gonna start adding reverb in. And you see how it sounds like it's further away? Right? Sounds closer. And then back to and if I did something like that, right, it sounds much further away. There are other methods that you can use to create depth. Let me show you another kind of reverb. So that's an algorithmic reverb, right? It uses numbers to create a lot of delays, a lot of echoes to create the illusion of ambient space.
And it seemed like the more reverb you added, the amplitude of the piano automatically went down.
Correct. That's the effect that you'll get. It actually isn't going down. What's happening is that the reverb is getting louder.
Ah, okay.
Right? I'm turning the mix of the piano down. So the actual volume of the piano is staying the same, but what you're hearing is more of the reverbed sound by turning the mix up. So this is something called altiverb. Now this is way advanced, but I just want to, this will give us a couple of really cool ways to explain this. So what this is, it's called convolution reverb. So basically they do what's called a sine wave sweep in a place and they capture the characteristics of that room. So let's say we're in Lefrak Hall and we have a speaker on stage pointed out into the audience. And let's say you set up your microphones on the 5th row. You do the sine wave sweep and you capture the sound of the room at 5 feet. If you're at the 5th row, if you're at the 5th row, you have a certain perception of the sound in the stage. If you're in the back row and you do the same thing, the hall is bigger, so you're going to experience more reverb. Although the sound does bounce all around the room, you're going to hear a lot of reverb in that room anyway. What these companies do when they make what are called impulse responses that trigger this reverb is they set up microphones in different places in the hall. So let's do this. So we'll take Disney Hall, right? So they've got a pair of microphones 6 meters away from the stage. Right? This will be 14 meters away from the stage. This is 24 meters away from the stage. So you can get a sense of depth. So this is a different kind of reverb, and does a good job of approximating the sound of Disney Hall or any of the other places that they've got. I mean, they've got stuff from all over the world, and they also have gear and crazy stuff, like they've got a stadium. Sports Palace, Wembley in London. So here's a 15-second. So it's kind of cool. Now, obviously, because we're listening to this on Zoom, it's compromised. The audio is compromised. It's not even stereo. So does that answer your question, Arun?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay. So let me just play something in here on the piano. I won't use the click track. I just want to show you something. All right, so one more time, let me just play this. Okay, so I don't like the sound of that piano. Now, I'm just talking about right now affecting one instrument. The big thing about EQ is how do you make multiple instruments fit together. So let me do this. This is a frequency analyst from this company called Blue Cat. We have these in the school computers. They're free. I'm going to put it in here. They're a really good company. And I'm going to turn off the target mode. And then let me play this. So the way that you read this is from left to right is low pitch to high pitch. So this one goes down to 10 hertz. That's 10 vibrations per second. And it goes all the way up to 22,000 hertz or 22 kilohertz. From bottom to top is amplitude or volume. So the lower the graph, the softer. The higher the graph, the louder. So you see that most of the action is happening in this area here, and then you could see the higher the frequencies are, it goes down. Now, you don't need to have as much volume for higher frequencies to stick out. Everybody knows that a piccolo can cut through 500 instruments because it's a very high-pitched instrument. But like a speaker for a bass instrument, is huge because it needs that space to project out all those low energy frequencies. Now, shaping the sound. EQ is a volume control. Remember I said that dealing with volume is 90% of the issue? So there are many ways when mixing that you can deal with volume. One is you simply turn the volume down, right? Over here. Softer. Louder. And also we have Midi volume. Now, how many of you remember the class I did in this, either if those of you that took Recording Studio Fundamentals and or that took Audio Midi 1 last semester, where I showed you how on an organ patch you can change the sound of the harmonics above it by pulling and pushing in and pulling out the drawbars to bring in the volumes and the different harmonics, right? Remember that? We did that in class.
Yeah, you did that in the summer too.
Yes, exactly, because I think it's really a great way to explain overtones. Like I wish that somebody, when I was an undergraduate, that somebody had explained it to me like that, because it took me until I was in my 30s to start to even understand what they meant by harmonics and overtones and how they create tone, timbre and everything. So I just find that that's really good, because we're musicians, all of us, and we think in terms of notes, pitches. Engineers think in terms of frequencies. I hear that the upper overtones are what's bothering me. I want to find out where that is in the sound spectrum and control that volume, as an example. So let's talk about that here. I'm going to leave this off on the side, and I'm going to disappear for a minute so we have more screen space. Let's leave this here, and then I'm going to call up. Now, up until now, I've been having you guys use the one-band EQ to make things a little brighter or a little darker. And I still want you to use that when you're comfortable with it. But let's talk a little bit about using this 7-band EQ. And let me turn off the target mode so they'll both stay up. Now, the 7-band EQ, this one in particular, has a graph that has the same function as this, except you do not see you don't see all this stuff inside of it. So on this bar here, you're adding no or subtracting no volume. So right now, if I play the sound, I'm not affecting the volume anywhere because it's all at the 0 line. If you increase any of the areas on this line by dragging it up or turning the knobs here, you will be adding volume. 6 decibels, 12 decibels, 18 decibels. If you reduce the volume, you bring it any of these areas so that they're below the 0 line, you are subtracting volume from those frequencies. And on the left are the low frequencies, and on the right are the high frequencies. So let's take a look at this EQ, and we'll go through the functions of this EQ. So up here, you have on the left a high-pass filter, and on the right, a low-pass filter. It says HPF here and LPF here. You have the same slope that we had on the one-band EQ, right? 12, 24, and I'll explain that. And then you have the frequencies right here. You turn these on by clicking on where this button here that says in, and it becomes blue. So let's just look at the high-pass filter first. So right now we have a 6 decibel per octave slope starting at around 20 hertz. Now if I pull that up, you can see it's this yellow ball here. It goes beyond those other balls that are on the 0 line, and it gets rid of all those frequencies. So I'll play the piano and do that sweep again. right? So you can hear the difference between those sounds. So I'll play it and I'll take. Now, the other thing too that's interesting about that is that it also gives a little bit of the impression of it being further away because you're not hearing all the low frequencies, right? So that also gives you a little bit of a sense of space and distance, but that's not its main function. Now, let's do this again and let's change the slope. So if I click this and drag it up, you see how sharp that gets? That's 24 decibels. So for every octave up below the cutoff point, I'm reducing it by 24 decibels. So let me play this. Right, so do you hear how the difference? 6, 24. So it's a volume control. It's turning the volume of all these frequencies down by this, the function of this, 6, 12, 18, or 24. Let's turn that off and let's turn this on. And we'll do the opposite. So this is a low-pass filter. A low-pass filter allows low frequencies to pass through unattenuated and attenuates the high frequencies. So right, it sounds very muted now. Now, one thing that you have to work on developing, which is not easy, to put it bluntly, is developing a way to listen into a sound. So I know this sound very well because I've used it for literally, if I told you 15 years, I think I bought Ivory, the first version of Ivory 15 years, and this piano came with it. And they've improved the sound because when I first purchased it, I think it was only 16-bit, and I think it had only 10 levels of dynamics, and now it's got 18, and it's 24-bit. So it sounds better. But it's using the same recordings. They just, as technology improved, they were able to redo the editing of those samples and add more dynamic levels and reprogram the instrument. I happen to know that there's a little bit of mud in the mid-range that I'd like to get rid of, around 500. I just know that from using this. So let's get to that in a second. Down here, in this area here, are 5 bands of EQ. So this is a 5-band parametric EQ. You can see that they're color-coded. This one's red. It is associated with this red ball here. This one is orange. It's associated with this one here. Yellow for the mid-frequency. So they've got them notated. LF for low frequencies, low mids, mid-frequencies, high mid-frequencies, and then the high frequencies. It's got activation button here. You can have them in and out, and that's good for A-Bing. So in other words, if you want to hear what it sounds like without what you've done, you could turn it off. Then it has this button here. This is the Q, it's called, and it's here. And Q is not some crazy conspiracy theory going around the internet right now. It's just, it means the width of the, or the slope of the bandwidth of the curve of the EQ. I'll show you. It's easier to show than for me to explain. This is the frequency. This is at 100 hertz. And this is the gain. This is how much level you add or subtract. So let's go to the low mid frequency, and I'm going to subtract, right, 10 dB. And do you see how wide this curve is here? That's because the Q is at 1. Watch what happens when I bring the Q up. It gets very tight. Now, you can also add volume like that. And then if you hit the Option key and click on this knob, any of these knobs, they go back to their default setting. So let me show you that again. Holding the Option key down, and I'm going to click on the Q for the low mid frequencies, and it goes back down to the default status, which is 1. Okay, so how do you find the areas that are bothering you, right? So there's a couple of ways of doing it. One way, is to do a sweep with a very tight Q where you exaggerate the issue. So what do I mean by that? I turn the volume up here. So do you hear right there, there's sort of like a dissonance in the harmonics? It's like almost sounds like a wow a little bit. Right? So it's somewhere in between like 450 and 600. So if I wanted to clean that up, what I would do would be I want to reduce the volume of that stuff. So I would reduce it, and then I would make my Q a little bit more gentle, and maybe I wouldn't reduce it that much. I just bring it down a little bit. And I can bypass and listen to it. Or I can bypass it here. Just those mid-range chords sound a little bit clearer from my perspective here, right? But that's how you that's how you start to deal with finding out EQing something, right? We're going to go over this. Don't worry if you don't get it now. This is an introduction. This is just an introduction. I'm just showing you the basic principles, how this EQ works, and how you go about finding problem frequencies. Now, let me just show you something else while I have you here. So I'm going to sweep this guy here and then watch what happens to the graph over there. You see how much more activity there is in this area? And there's more activity here because I've increased the volume of these harmonics. I can reduce. Let me make the Q a little wider. You see how much less volume there is here? You see how much louder that is right there? You can see it on the graph. So the EQ is reducing the harmonics and the fundamental, and some of the fundamental notes, because we're in this area here. And that's really what it's doing. It's a volume control, controlling frequencies. Now, is this easy to do? No, but we'll start. That's one reason why in the last 2 semesters, when I asked you to do EQ, I just asked you to, if it's too bright, use a low pass and turn down the treble. If it's too dark, use a high pass and turn down some of the low frequencies. Just to get a sensitivity and a start to adjusting the timbre of a piece, of an instrument. And now we're in Audio Midi 2. This is more advanced, so I want you to start working with this. Now, What I will tell you when you're working with EQ is when you think you've got something right, reduce the amount of the gain. So in other words, if you've added 5 dB and you think it sounds good, cut it down to 2 or 3 dB. If you've subtracted 10 dB and you think it sounds good, bring it back up to like minus 4 dB, because chances are you're taking too much away. You have to be really careful when you're using any of these volume controls, whether it's a compressor, which we'll get into next class, or EQ. You can really destroy a sound, right? So here's our nice piano sound. There you go. So I've ruined that piano sound by putting a ridiculous EQ curve in there. So you have to be really careful with this stuff. Oh, you didn't see that. My fault. Here we go. Right, that's ridiculous. You know, that looks like, I don't know, like a route in outer space or something like that, where you're going to visit these planets or something. But
A roller coaster.
thank you. But you can really ruin a sound. So you have to be judicious in your use of EQ. And you'll never stop learning about it. Right? I've been doing this for decades and I'm still getting better at it. So we're going to start you off. We did start you off gently with just the high and low pass filters the first 2 semesters of this class. And now we're moving into the next step, but we're going to be using judicious EQ, and we're going to be using EQ in a couple of ways. Yeah, this is important. So there's corrective EQ. Let's say you've recorded something and it's poorly mic'd, or the instrument doesn't sound good. So you'll want to try to correct some of those issues in EQ. Or there's enhanced EQ, like you like the way something sounds, but you want it to sound a little bit bigger and beefier. So you add, because it works with your track, so you add some low mids. So that's enhancement. And then there's also EQ, where you're trying to like make 2 instruments fit together. So that could be a combination of enhancing with EQ or corrective EQ, because an instrument may sound great on its own, but when you combine it with another instrument, they may share overtones that clash. Things in the same, they might not be the exact overtone, but they're close to each other, and that rub can really cause a very unpleasant sound. So those are some of the applications of EQ. And EQ is also used in a mix to make space. So, for example, I could show you this. We have time. All right, so let me just delete this, quickly play this in. This is a drum program, and I'm just going to play in, well, hold on. I just played a hi-hat in, right? So let me reset all this stuff. Great. So I've got these hi-hats. They sound really good on their own, but in a mix, they have a lot of frequencies we don't need. So I can use a high-pass filter. Let me, right? They sound really good right now still. But I've gotten rid of all this information here, which leaves space for the kick drum, right? Because if you've got if you've got instruments that you really want to be really prominent in your mix, like a kick drum or a bass, you want to clear out some space that are in other instruments. If I'm playing an acoustic guitar and I want it to fit in with a bass, I want to make sure that I leave space for the bass to fit with that acoustic guitar. That can be accomplished in one of two ways. You can use EQ to roll off some of that low end, or you can mic that acoustic guitar in a way that de-emphasizes those low instruments. And the way that you would do that is by angling the mic a little bit down on the acoustic guitar, which I may have shown you. I think I showed you guys that took recording studio fundamentals. I think we did that when Sam was playing the guitar. So the way you mic something, you're thinking in advance as to like how it's going to fit into the track. So you use your miking technique to do things so that you don't have to eventually use EQ to correct things. But if you just get given a set of tracks, then you just make do with it the best you can. And that brings me up to another point before we call it a day today. Give me 1 second. So everybody in this class is set up to do this kind of work for the rest of the semester, so I'm not really worried about that. But we are going to be recording live, and I'm going to be teaching you to do that. And we put together kits. Last semester, I started anticipating this problem, and we had some money in the budget, and we bought 22 recording kits. So these recording kits have an audio interface, a USB interface, a microphone, a windscreen, a mic stand, cables, and they come in a case. So I think some of you already have an interface and a microphone, so you won't need this, but some of you that don't, when the time comes, which is probably going to be in about towards the last week of October, we're going to have to make plans where you're going to have to get together with Justin at the college to pick up the kits and sign them out for the rest of the semester. Now, the issue with that is that as of right now, there is no mechanism for the students to go to the campus and pick stuff up. So what we've been doing for my recording studio fundamentals class is Justin had Carlos, one of the assistants, took a bunch of stuff home and over to Justin's apartment, and people have been going and picking up stuff at Justin's apartment in Long Island City, which is really out there, but that's really the way it is. But hopefully that's going to be rectified soon, because I got an email from Justin last week that at some point next week, I believe, or the week after, you'll be able to go to the library to take out computers. So some students need to sign out a computer for the semester. So if they're allowing people to do that, then we should be able to get you to, pick up something from the campus. Now, I don't know if this news about the COVID increase is going to change that, especially since it's in Queens and Brooklyn, but we're just going to have to keep an eye on that and do the best we can with everything. Yep. So how many of you actually, you could type it in, how many of you need the recording kit? You want to type your names in to the yes in the chat room? So I've got 2. Roberto, do you have an interface and a microphone?
Yes, I do.
Great. And Irene, you have one? Oh, Irene's not here anymore. Oh, and neither is, I don't think that she does, and I don't think that Charlie does either. All right, so I would say probably half the class will need stuff, and then the other class won't, so the rest of the class won't. So I think that we're going to call it a day today. That's quite a bit of information. I'll try. I have to teach another class today, and I have to teach tomorrow. So I'll try to get to your stuff, your assignment, as soon as I can. So just do your best to continue on forward to hand in. Everybody knows what to do for next week when the assignment is to be handed in. Is that
Go over
correct?
it one more time, just so we know.
Yeah, I think I actually put it up on the.
Professor, also, could you let us know the programs you use today? Because you use a lot of programs in class, so I don't think I can remember the whole thing if I want to use it.
Okay, so I'm going to write it in now. EQ7, Deverb, and then mod delay. Those are the three that we're going to be working with. The other stuff you don't have. You know, the Altiverb and the other reverb you don't have. They're expensive programs. I don't want you to buy them. But these come with Pro Tools, and those are the ones that we'll be using.
Mode delay and then EQ7 and what else?
Deverb. I have it. It's in the chat, Huna. If you can see the chat right now. So let me go to Google Classroom. Logging in. All right, so this is what's due for today, right? It's up here. So for next week, what you're going to make is that a piece of music where you just have one version of structure in Pro Tools, and you've got your submixes all programmed in, and you're going to create a remix like we did last week in class. Right? Do you remember that, Kevin?
Yeah, I watched the video from last week. So yeah,
Right. That's exactly that's yeah. Right. So like a little 2-minute version of your eight bar piece where it's, you know, you have all your different submixes and you do something that makes some sort of sense to you. Musical sense.
Were we supposed to hand in the 16 bars today though?
If you want me to take a listen to it and make comments, yes, you can.
Okay.
I'll be definitely looking at it. If you feel comfortable and like you know that you've got something good and you don't want feedback, no worries. It's your call. Whatever.
Is it 2 minutes long?
90 seconds, 2 minutes. Yeah, it's just make a nice little piece. Yeah, I just want you to, you know, remember how I did stuff where I had a loop going, right? A loop going, and then I did some hits right at the same time. So you don't always have to just play one note at a time. You can just play a couple of stabs here and there and do some accents, right? That's sort of a cool thing too. So just use your creativity. You know, I want to give you like a broad outline, and I want you to come up with something that you like and sell it to me. I don't want to tell you exactly what to do. I've told you so much of what to do right here, but I want that final thing for you to use your own creativity in terms of what you come up with.
Professor, real quick, I downloaded the Project Sam library with the like orchestra tracks. How do I run that in Pro Tools?
So did you download the Kontakt free player from Native Instruments?
Yeah, I did.
And you installed that?
Is it in Kontakt free?
Yeah, and you installed that? It's called the
it comes
Kontakt
up
player.
In Pro Tools, the Kontakt free player.
Yeah,
I don't know if I have like a
okay.
separate application on my
not
computer.
a problem. So let me screen. So I don't have the Kontakt free player in this computer, all right? But
okay, I might have just been looking in Kontakt.
so if you go to Instrument, right, it would say Kontakt player instead of Kontakt, and you would load it in. Now, before you do that, you have to, and you can find.
Oh yeah, no, I have this.
Right, but it'll show up in the browser area here. So in other words, if you're not seeing that right here, it comes up like this, you click on this, and then it'll show you all the things that you can see. And then your libraries will be here. So it should show up here. If it's not showing up here, what you have to do is you have to go to your native access. Did you download that?
Yeah.
And you have to enter the serial number. Let me show
Okay.
you. Right? Let me show you how to do that real quick. Oh, really? This is one thing I hate about these installers is that
You constantly need to like update.
they're constantly updating, yeah, which slows us down. All right. Okay. That's not too bad. Oh, really? Tick, 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 tick. You know, so much of my life is spent waiting for stuff. Okay, so Sam, do you see right up here? It says add a serial.
Okay, and that
So
and the serial number would be like
you got emailed. You got emailed. Emailed.
Got it.
Right.
Got
so you
it.
just copy it and you just paste it right into the first field here, and the whole. If you copy the entire serial number and you paste it into the first field here, it will go into every field properly.
Awesome. Thank you.
And then you add a serial number. But then once you've done that, Sam, there's one other step you have to go. You have to go to. It says here, add library. Right. Let's see. Right. And then what you'd have to do is you'd have to browse for the folder where you've stored the this Project Sam sounds, and then install, and then it will activate it. And I'm sure that there's videos on YouTube, and then it'll show. And then next time you start up Kontakt Player, it'll show up here. And then how to insert these sounds is you open up Instruments, and just click and drag it in there. And then there's your bombastic basses.
All right, cool. I should be good now. Thank you.
All right, great. All right, so unless we have any burning questions, I think that's quite a bit of. Oh, do you remember Yina? Yes, I do. Okay. Okay. Okay, so that's it for today. I thank you guys, and we will catch you in a week. A lot of information today. Just, we're going to go over all that EQ stuff again. All right? So I'll get the video up by the end of the week, the review video.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you, Professor.
Bye.
Bye-bye.